A viral respiratory illness appears in southern China and spreads through a number of countries within months, affecting a total of around 8,000 people. The year is 2003 and the illness is called Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, SARS for short. The virus causing it was the first coronavirus to cause a severe disease in humans. In 2020, another coronavirus, Sars Coronavirus 2, has taken the world by storm, spreading at a scale unprecedented in recent history. The disease that causes is termed COVID-19. How COVID-19 turned from a Chinatown outbreak to a pandemic is the topic of this video. Wuhan is the capital city of Hubei province in central China and home to around 11 million people. On 30th December 2019, WHO China office received reports of an outbreak of a respiratory disease of an unknown etiology in Wuhan. 27 patients had been affected by then. On January 7, the cause of the disease was identified to be a novel coronavirus, later named as Sars Coronavirus 2. The initial cases reported were associated with exposure in a seafood market in Wuhan, suggesting an animal origin of the virus. More on that later. On 13th January, Thailand reported the first imported case of the disease outside China. On 15th, Japan reported its first case, and on 20th, South Korea and USA reported a case each. By the end of the month, there were nearly 10,000 documented cases of COVID-19, with 106 of them outside China. The virus has reached 20 countries. Italy reported its first 2 cases on 31st of January. Both patients had travel history to Wuhan. A Chinese family of 6 flew from Shenzhen to Wuhan on December 29 and returned to Shenzhen 5 days later. Between January 4th and 10th, 5 of them developed symptoms of pneumonia and 4 of them tested positive for the novel coronavirus. A 7th family member, who hasn't traveled, became symptomatic and tested positive as well. This confirmed the possibility of human-to-human transmission of the disease for the first time. Until then, almost all cases were associated with exposure to Huanan seafood market. Now, human-to-human transmission via aerosols is the major mode of transmission of the virus. The more the contact with infected patient, the higher the risk of disease transmission. This is particularly relevant in healthcare workers, where the hazards are two-pronged. Infection of healthcare workers leading to depletion of workforce, and transmission by infected healthcare workers to family members and other patients. The transmission rate of a disease is indicated by what epidemiologists call the basic reproduction number, or R0. For the novel coronavirus, this number is around 2.2. This means that on average, each infected person will transmit the disease to 2 more persons. Given the ease of transmission by respiratory droplets, as in coughing or sneezing, the huge number of asymptomatic carriers, and the ability of asymptomatic patients to transmit the disease, the spread becomes logarithmic. In comparison, for seasonal influenza, R0 is around 1.3. Couple the high infectivity rate of the novel coronavirus with its high case fatality rate, around 3%, compared to case fatality rate of 0.6% for influenza, we have the perfect ingredients for a deadly pandemic. Apart from aerosol transmission, the virus remains alive on surfaces like cardboard, steel, plastic, etc. for a variable amount of time, leading to what is called fomite transmission. Infection can likely result from when a person touches his mouth, nose, or eyes after contact with such a contaminated surface. Researchers in US tested the viability of novel coronavirus and aerosols on 4 surfaces: copper, cardboard, stainless steel, and plastic under laboratory conditions of temperature 21 to 23 degrees and relative humidity of 40%, and compared it to the Sars Coronavirus. They found that the virus remains stable for hours on these surfaces. Viability was longest on stainless steel and plastic, with half-lives of 5.6 and 6.8 hours, respectively, and the detectable levels of the virus were present for up to 72 hours on these surfaces. Viability was shortest for copper. They concluded that stability of the virus for various surfaces and air was comparable to that of Sars coronavirus, and the virus remains viable for hours in air and for days on surfaces like stainless steel and plastic. The first case probably occurred around mid-December. On 30th December, when the disease was reported to WHO, the number of documented cases was 27. By mid-January, there were around 270 cases, majority of them in China, 2 in Thailand, and 1 in Japan and South Korea each. All the cases outside China were of people who had recently traveled to Wuhan. On January 30th, WHO declared the outbreak as public health emergency of international concern. Total cases till then were around 8,000, affecting 20 countries. The same day, Italy reported its first 2 cases, both imported from China. On February 9, Iran reported the presence of COVID-19, though certain reports claimed that the disease had entered long before that and caused at least 1 death. Iran and Italy were to become the new hubs of the virus, with devastating consequences. By the end of February, local spread of the disease in other countries gained pace. On 29 December, the total number of cases in China rose to 79,000, with more than 2,800 deaths. The global tally, excluding China, was around 6,000, distributed in 53 countries, with 86 deaths. Sars coronavirus 2 has reached all the continents except Antarctica. The highest number of cases outside China were in South Korea, at more than 3,000, Italy more than 800, and Iran around 400. March was the month where the virus marched at a rampant pace globally, while cases in mainland China declined. First Iran and then Italy were the worst hit in terms of mortality. By mid-March, Iran had 12,000 cases with over 1,300 deaths. Italy had 21,000 cases with over 1,400 deaths. Korea painted a contrasting picture to Iran and Italy. By mid-March, it had 8,000 cases. China's tally reached 81,000, and the number of new cases reported declined by the day. With the spread down to a halt in China, Europe emerged as the new epicenter of the disease, with Spain reporting around 5,700 cases, the most in Europe after Italy, with more than 130 deaths, followed by France with over 4,000 cases and 91 deaths. Germany reported over 3,700 cases. Italy overtook China in terms of number of deaths on 19th March, with total number of deaths 3,405. The same day, the global tally crossed 200,000. The first 100,000 took over 3 months, the next 100,000 only 12 days. In US, the number of cases crossed 10,000. China announced no new locally transmitted cases for the 3rd consecutive day on March 21. On March 11, WHO declared the outbreak as a pandemic. The outbreak has affected the world countries disproportionately. Some countries, like Iran, Italy, and France, have been severely affected, in comparison to South Korea, for example, where the number of cases rose rapidly at the outset, but it seems the country was able to control the virus to a considerable extent. Various factors have been proposed, like imposition of stringent lockdown measures in China and extensive tracking of contacts and mass testing in South Korea. Population demographics have also been an important factor. The higher percentage of elderly population in Italy, for example, is partly responsible for its high mortality rate. Towards the end of March, Europe and USA became the new hubs of the virus. USA became the world leader in terms of the number of cases, overtaking Italy and China on March 27. By the end of April, Spain has the highest number of cases in Europe, and Italy the highest number of deaths. UK's tally is rising exponentially by the day. US national tally is just towards the million mark. Global tally crossed 1 million on April 4th. It doubled within the next 2 weeks. COVID-19, it seems, has truly become viral. Coronaviruses are a large group of viruses which are thought to have taken the jump towards humans from wild animals where they commonly reside. 6 members of this group are known to cause diseases in humans. Sars Coronavirus 2 is the 7th one. Sars Coronavirus was the first coronavirus to cause fatal disease in humans in 2003. Followed by Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, which caused an outbreak in Middle East in 2012 and 2013. The latest and most widespread is Sars Coronavirus 2. The remaining 4 viruses cause mild upper respiratory tract diseases in humans. Sars Coronavirus 2, initially named 2019 novel coronavirus, is thought to have originated from an animal source, most likely a bat or a pangolin. 2 things make this theory of origin plausible. First, clustering of the initial cases of COVID-19 in Huanan seafood market where wild animals are illegally traded, and second, the genetic sequence of the virus showed 96% sequence homology to a similar coronavirus obtained from bats in China. The site through which it binds to specific receptors in human lungs, called receptor binding domain, however, is different from that of the bat's virus, and strongly similar to other coronaviruses found in Malayan pangolins, which are illegally imported to Guangdong province in China. Based on these findings and their own research, immunologist Kirsten Anderson and colleagues from the Scripps Research Institute, California, reported on the probable origin of the virus in the scientific journal Nature, and suggested that the virus most likely arose from these animal sources and underwent genetic mutations in either intermediary animal host or human host, which made them capable of causing disease in humans. Based on their research, they also ruled out the possibility that the virus was genetically engineered in a laboratory. Structurally, a novel coronavirus is spherical in shape, with protein projections from the outer surface called spikes, giving it crown-like appearance, hence the name coronavirus. A lipid layer surrounds the virus RNA material. The spikes are attached to a lipid layer and latched onto receptors in human lungs called angiotensin-converting enzyme 2 receptors. This spike protein is considered a potential target for vaccine preparation. Symptoms of COVID-19 range from mild flu-like symptoms, most common being dry cough and fever, to pneumonia, which requires hospitalization, to a severe respiratory condition called Acute Respiratory Distress Syndrome, or ARDS, which may require ventilatory support and has a high fatality rate. Many patients infected by the virus are asymptomatic and can transmit the disease to others without knowing it. Chinese investigators from Wuhan reported that 81% of the patients developed the mild form of the disease, which is self-limited. 14% developed pneumonia, requiring hospitalization, and around 5% needs ICU care. Reports of case fatality rates vary in different studies, mainly due to the difficulty to assess fatality accurately during an ongoing outbreak. Mortality is higher in the elderly and in immunocompromised individuals. Initial reports from China estimated fatality at around 2%. These figures, however, were later revised to 3.8% in February by the WHO China Joint Mission. Higher rates are reported elsewhere, approaching 10% in some areas, like Italy. The global mortality rate reported by WHO in March was 3.4%. To know more about how has the world responded to the pandemic, where are we in terms of treatment and vaccine against the novel coronavirus, and how will this pandemic pan out? Subscribe to this channel and watch the next episode.